Good afternoon, everybody. Um, Hello to my regular watchers. And I know I have a couple of y'all out there. I appreciate you showing up every 2 weeks. Um, I'm assuming y'all are hearing me. I had messed something up when this started, but if you could just give me a heck yeah in the comments real quick, just so I'm sure. It's been a very long day, and I don't think I could run Notepad correctly. But if you are hearing me, let me know. I'm just going to assume that, thank you, Brian, that everything is good. I appreciate everybody today. So this episode is going to be a follow up to something I started in the last session. Something that went a little bit haywire, which I'm fine. Like that's what I want when we work with code and play and just kind of see what happens. I am absolutely fine with it taking a left turn. But so I plan to give some background context into what we talked about last time, in case you weren't there. Um, and then kind of move into it. And I was thinking about, what I was going to do because I do plan things a little bit. And I realized we may actually be able to fix our issues really, really quickly, leaving us with some additional time. So I'm going to go personal actually for just a few minutes before we get right into code, which I am allowed to do because we're all human. I, for a very large part of my life, have had anxiety. And 7 years ago, my anxiety was bad. And then something happened and it got a lot worse. So that's just something I deal with. And what's kind of funny is that it's such a part of my life, part of my normal, that every now and then when it subsides, which it does happen, and typically not related anything good or bad happening, it just kind of goes away. But when my anxiety goes away for like a day, I don't recognize what it is. Like I don't know, like, why do I feel this way? Like, oh, I don't have existential dread about everything. Uh yeah, it's weird. So I bring that up because I am absolutely dealing with a heck of a lot of it right now. So I'm gonna do my best to pretend and just be cool because that's what you do when you have anxiety. Is you can kind of do your best to make sense of it. So hopefully that wasn't too boring. And I actually do want to uh, talk about code and specifically the problem that we worked on last session, what we were trying to solve, what went wrong, and my ideas of how I think we can make it better. So let me switch my view. Oh, no, not that one. I mean this one. All right. So you should be seeing, and let me use that lovely banner. This is the Git repository for all of CodeBreak, but specifically, if you want to quickly grab the code while you're watching this, the folder you would want for what we started on last time and then finish is the API folder. But just kind of keep in mind that this repository is where you will find everything we're working on. Obviously, whatever I do in the next 20-ish or so minutes will add to that as well. So let's talk about what went wrong. And give me a second here to open up our code. And actually, let's run this, and then we could talk about it. All right, so do what you got to do. Sweet, and you went to the wrong window. Give me 1 second. All right, so our website, which is running in one window and not the other because that makes sense. I'm not going to worry about that right now. But let me just switch to the code because I feel like I'm going way, way around here. So the core thing that we were talking about last week was using a API and a web app, which normally when it works well is incredibly easy. If you're hitting an API that's returning JSON and is set up properly security wise, then it just works. The issue that you run into is in dealing with an API that wasn't really built to be used by a web client. One of the first things you will get is what's called a CORS error, cross-origin resource sharing. Basically, the browser at your domain, so raymondcamden.com, when it makes an API request to some other server, the browser wants that server to say, "Hey, I am fine with people calling this API." And if your browser doesn't get that response, then it will essentially just block it. It won't let you call that. So the issue that you run into with an API that's a little bit earlier is that it was set up before CORS was a thing. It's not, even thinking about being called by a web client, and it's not going to return that data in a way that makes sense. So in the session, we began with that simple API. It was the dad joke API. Again, made to be used in the web. It just plain works. But what I wanted to switch to was an API that is not quite as friendly. And let's open this up right now. And you keep going to the wrong browser, so I will keep bringing you over here. And this will work. This is a API for airport issues. I am a bit of a travel nerd, and I like airplanes and airports. So this API looked like it made something kind of cool to work with. But you can see it is returning XML. So what we did in the last session was we set up a simple Netlify website, or just a static website that was going to use serverless functions to proxy to the XML API so we don't get a CORS error, and then also take that result and make it a bit better for the browser. JavaScript does have XML support. You can do that in the browser. But if we could do that all within this serverless function, then in theory, it will work a little bit easier. It'll be simpler for the front end code to use. So if I'm just trying to actually find, there we go, test real. Yeah, that's where we were hitting it. So let me make sure my server is up and running. Let me make this a little bit bigger. I see it crashed, but I'm sure there's a valid reason for that. We'll run this again. And our file, thank you for doing the right browser at least, was test real. Wow, boom, there we go. All right. I never made an index file for that, so that's why it didn't work. By the way, the reason that I am using Netlify is twofold. One, it's a great service. But second is that it lets me use serverless functions alongside the site itself. So I could use any serverless platform. I could use Lambda, OpenWhisk, etc., and have that different server. But when I build with Netlify, I have, let me actually get this open. I have my HTML, my JavaScript, see all my web assets in the same repository as my serverless functions. Now, I know that Netlify is just copying over to Amazon. That's not my problem. It just makes it a little bit easier for us to test. So I had written that code to hit the serverless function, and it's working. You can see the results up here, and I'm just rendering it out. Let's go down to the code. Again, if I go too fast, let me know. I just dumped in that text area the value that came back. And it was a bunch of objects, and it was real messy. And where I stopped last week was I really want to rewrite the XML so that it looks a bit nicer. And we will go into that code, and you could see I was doing a couple of things. The first thing I did was use a NPM module to do the XML parsing for me. Now this works, but it's also kind of dumb. So when we do convert XML, I shouldn't say dumb. I should say simple. It does one thing only, and that's typically a pretty good thing to have. But when it is converting the XML result into JSON, it's making a huge object. And in fact, what I want to do is I want to leave this whole Netlify website environment and switch to Run.js, because Run.js is a very handy tool. I used it uh, in my very first session, or where I talked about it, as one of the tools that I use to quickly test code. So what we're going to do is, instead of running it on Netlify and debugging there, because that's where I was last time, I want to take like a raw look at this XML and have a simpler canvas to do. This is almost like I'm basically making a new folder and making a Node.js file and writing code there and testing there. But the thing about Run.js is that it allows me to not save it to a real file and worry about where to put it. It's just a run JavaScript in the app type thing, type app. So I want to quickly look at the XML raw. So again, I'm just running this server-side code from the serverless function in Run.js to skip and shortcut the process of testing and seeing what's going on. So I should see XML data as one big string. So go back to my serverless function. This is the part that was converting it. So we'll get just that. And we will say let test, because I'm very, very creative in naming my variables. And we will log this out to console, and we will tab it a little bit so it's a little bit more readable. And this is where I got stuck last time. Yeah, it is very kind of large and messy. And to be clear, this is a JavaScript representation of the XML packet that was sent. But where I kind of got, let me go back to where we were. Where I kind of got slowed down was, all right, how am I going to rewrite this a bit nicer? And my testing was basically saving the file, going to the browser, reloading. So it did the call to the serverless function, looking at console, and moving this to Run.js will hopefully allow me to do it a little bit better. So I was parsing on here, essentially taking this, we know is always going to be a top level thing. We're always going to have a children. I even had code that basically ignored the first two items because they were always an update time and a DTT, which I'm going to call on my XML knowledge here, is a data type definition that describes the XML data being represented. I have no clue if that's right or wrong, but right here, I believe I get all the children and I grab that first one because it is important. But then I think I'm filtering only for delay types. And if we go back to Run.js, see, this is the back and forth I didn't like. We could see that the important information is going to be in that particular array of data. And it should be an array. Yeah, it is. So that's where I got stuck. So thinking about this today, again, the main thing that I wanted to do was get it over here in Run.js, just so we can kind of quickly iterate. And I wanted a function that would just say, reformat it, and then copy and paste that back into my client-side code. That was my plan. And we do have it here running so we could see how it worked. And then I thought, when I searched npm for XML to JSON, I kind of picked one of the first ones and I stopped. Maybe I could look some more. So XML to JSON, and we get a couple results. So XML to JSON, I thought about, maybe I could try that. But one of the things I always do is look at a project's GitHub repository. And when I was looking around here, I noticed that it has been archived, which means the project is dead. That could be okay for a thing that doesn't need to change, but typically I see archived and I just say like, no, that's all right. But I kept looking and I came across, because I found it so easily earlier today, I found an npm module and it's not showing up. So I'm going to look at the ones I installed here. I know it's fast something. Fast XML parser. That's it. All right. I don't know why this didn't show up in my initial results. Fast parser. Even their website search is not showing it that great. Well, let's just go there. So we will npm fast XML parser. Now it's going to show up. I found this one, and I wasn't really even concerned about the speed of things, but I saw it and I thought, let me actually try that. So I'm going to copy and paste their sample code and just kind of plop it in here into the same script. So I required their library, and these 2 lines will show me, parsing their data. So I'm going to put in kind of a line break here and then drop their code, and we are parsing response. And just for the heck of it, let's see how their information looks. So we will copy and paste that, and we are dumping JOBJ. Like that. All right. So default options for both, just saying hit that XML data, parse it. But let's run it. And again, this on top here, let me scroll this up. This is the result from the first one. So we will run this now and see the same thing. And then there. Oh, and by the way, this console.log is wrong. I do this all the time. So console.log, if you pass multiple things, it's just going to log one after the other. JSON.stringify takes 2 additional options. One being a formatter object, which you may not need. The second is the tab character to use. So I use JSON.stringify variable, comma null, comma /t anytime I'm dumping anything complex into the console, so it's actually readable. Typoed did that in the console.log, and it basically logged the value null and /t. But we're going to fix that now. I cannot type live sometimes. JOBJ, yeah, and run it again. So it makes sense to me, and there we go. So this is the incredibly nested, and again, this is why I stopped last time, very kind of complex version from that library I initially chose. And then we compare it to, and you could see even like on the scroll bar size, it's a heck of a lot smaller. That's near perfect. Like I don't think that I would rewrite that at all. I can see a couple of things I would consider. Perhaps trying to date parse those time values. Also, I'm not a fan of the uppercase keys. That's like always like a Microsoft thing. Like every API they use, they proper case things, and it throws me. But I think I'm fine essentially returning just this. Also include this as well, but I could definitely simplify, but a lot easier. So that's a long-winded way of saying that I'm going to say bye-bye to simple XML to JSON, and hello to fast XML parser. By the way, I probably mentioned in the first session that I had a long history of working in Cold Fusion. And one of the things that threw me when I switched to Node.js was that, there's this wonderful NPM library of everything out there. What threw me is that I went from, Cold Fusion essentially shipping various features and you have what you used, going to the Node.js world where I would look for a feed reader in NPM and get 1,000 results. And it's like, oh, like I have to actually think about what I'm using and you compare and contrast. So I absolutely recognize that that's a positive, good thing to have. At the same time, it still kind of throws me at times dealing with all those options. So getting rid of simple XML to JSON, switching to fast XML parser. I am going to ensure that that is in my package JSON by just installing it like so. All right. And we're not going to use their code anymore, but instead go back over here, convert XML. Nope, this. Make a new XML parser. Done right there. I'm fine with their variable name. And I will say, we'll call this, I'll make that a let to match let parsed. Not terribly descriptive, but we're going to make this a little bit better. So I had done a little bit of initial work to, again, reformat and reset things. I'm going to keep that update time parsed out. And if we go back to our sample code, we should see that should be airport information update. I'm sorry, airport status information, update time. So we will say parsed dot airport status information and update time. The typing, it is hard today. All right, so that should get that value. And then the info is going to be basically this array here, delay type. So we may be able to simplify this quite a bit. And we're going to say delays is an array of a result. And we can actually do this right here. Airport status information, and then the delay type array. And then just return that. And in theory, that should be it. That line's not going to work. So just to be clear again, we recognize that this other XML library parse things a heck of a lot simpler. So I'm updating the serverless function that I wrote to just wrap the calls to the XML API. And I may have very quickly returned it in a decent format. So I'm going to NTL dev this again, and then we're going to test. Remember, our front end code is literally just, yes, thank you for opening. That was test real. Our front end code is just dumping it in the thing. I really should put a index.html so that doesn't happen. So we got nothing in response, which means my dev tools are huge, which means probably our thing threw an error. Let's reload. And yes, it did. So we have a fetch error. We should go back to our server. And it did something. So let's see what happened here. Oh, nope, back in the code, I should say. So I do make my new parser. I parsed. I worked with that. You know what? Let's go ahead and console.log parse just to make sure we got data back. Back in the browser, reload again. It'll obviously make an error. And yeah, that's parsed. So, and I log, yeah, okay. And yeah, data is working. So it is literally, oh, yeah, because I'm returning the wrong variable. That is a simple one to fix. And to make it not so messy, let's get rid of some of these consoles, .logs, and reload. And can, yes, that is one data. And you know what? Let's go back to the client side code real quick and do the same thing here. Stringify. JSON stringify. I could type response.airport and use the same thing we did server side /t. All right. Whenever I see a red squiggle, that means I did something wrong. And sometimes I just remove a parentheses and hope that works. And it is stringify, not stingify. Saved, reload, back over here. Reload, not new T, and we've got, yes, we've got data in a slightly easier to read format. So what we're going to do now is actually make this real and as just as fast as humanly possible. Won't look great, but we will add an H2 airport status list. And then we are going to write to a results div. As simple as possible. So what I will do is stop logging to that text area, and that text area is gone now. All right. I want to take those results and start printing them out. So I'm going to make a empty variable for my string. I'm going to build some HTML. And the first thing I think I'm going to do is log out the update time. So I will do this. That's a backwards tick. If you don't know about template strings, ask me in the chat. And if I have time at the end, I'll show it. But we are going to add hdo updated at let's get the airport info. Airport info equals response.airport info. It's a bit more verbose than I would like, but airport info dot update time. All right. So this template string at this point is going to evaluate for airport info update time. And then I want to write this out. Document query selector. I believe I called it results. Yep. Results.enter HTML. This is quick and dirty equals S. So at this point, I should hit the serverless function, which is proxying to the XML, parse the XML, come back. Now I'm going to at least show the update time, and we'll see. And we do, it's great. And I could do more to make that look a little bit nicer. Obviously, my design skills leave a lot to be desired. Let's start actually looking over delays. That's going to be an array. So what I'm going to do here is for, it's called delay for d in airport info dot delays. And by the way, I always forget if it's D in or D of, and I guarantee you I'm going to be wrong. But basically what I'm doing now is I want to dump out each delay so I can think about how I want to add it to my HTML. And I was wrong. It is of. When you do in, it's giving you the index on that. I make that mistake every single time. So reload, and I see them. So looking at the data, we should definitely show the name. So we'll make a new variable, delay equals string. Delay equals, you know what, let's get rid of that. That's silly. Let delay equal. So we'll start with the location. P, and that was the name. Or, no, it is the type of thing. Let me look at this. You know what? I may have realized this is even more complex than I thought. Hold on one second. So we have two types. This is one, one of the fun things of working with an XML or API that's not been updated in probably 10 years. They don't document how it works. So now what I'm seeing, and let's actually go, we're not making this into a three-parter. I can tell you that right now. Open up this direct, and we have a list of delays. That's not readable, so we'll pass it in here real quick. Format, no, format, document, the whole thing, please. All right. Okay. Now I'm saying, so delays is an array of types, and under each one, that's weird. Like, so they have airport closures. I see. All right. Yeah, I really thought this was going to be a little bit easier, but it's not, because under delays, we have our two types. One of them, airport closures, has a list of airports, and ground delay only has one. I'd be willing to bet if they have two, they just switch to an array, and that's just not showing up. But what we're going to do is we are going to keep it simple, and I think look for airport closures. Yeah. So if I have an array of delays, I'm going to loop until I find the name equals airport closures. So that's going to make it hopefully a little bit simpler. So let me make it, let's start over here again. For D of airport info dot delays. If the name, the only one we care about is airport closures, it's going to be a little bit brittle, but we're going to make it work. D that name, it's going to be uppercase, right? I mentioned that earlier. If D name equals that, then this is the one we care about. And just to make it easy, we care. That's silly, but I will take it. And I'm going to get rid of this and still console.d, log D. All right, we got this. Save it, reload. Go back to my app, go into the console, try not to typo, and you know what? That sad thing is that even the code's like, dude, you messed that up. I think. Reload. And I got better. Airport info is not defined. One more time, airport info. Let's clear you. Let's reload you. Airport info is, wow, I think I probably typoed it worse. Airport info. All right, now for sure it's going to work. So it looped over them. It focused on the only one we care about, airport closures. And then we are going to look at airport. Let's look over here. Let's look at my formatted JSON. Under that is an array of airport closure list. And under that, we have an array value. And then we'll get to our data. All right. So we want to loop for let x equal 0, x less than D, which represents that delay object, airport closure lists. And remember, we made it easier. And that has a key called airport. And we want to iterate over that. So in theory, each one of these, let airport equals D dot airport closure list airport X. In theory, we will now get our closed airports. Really thought this would be easy. I thought, yeah, I'll be done in 5 minutes and I'll have to find someone to talk about. All right, there we have our airports. So I'm going to give the airport code and the reason, which is not terribly verbose, but we'll go with it. So for each one of these, we are going to append to our S variable plus equal And we'll make a little p tag, airport code airport dot, and we called it ARPT. And we will give the reason, which is not terribly useful, but we'll take it. Airport dot reason. Now we should also probably include the times and all that information, but at this point, I feel like I've beaten this dead horse quite a bit. And there we go. I'm gonna take a guess is that Las Vegas, there was a non-scheduled transient. I would be willing to bet that an airplane like breached the air bubble of safety that the ground control wants you to have, and that they had to pause things a bit as well. Yes, this was our easy to use API. I regret saying you never say anything's easy. So just to recap that very long trip that we just took on, we wanted to use an API that was not made to be used by a web app. So we went to a serverless function. Again, I used Netlify because it allowed me to write my code in my serverless function. It's all kind of bundled together. I didn't have to worry about using a third-party platform per se that's separate from my web hosting. But I needed a serverless function that I could call that would handle that CORS issue for me, so the browser would no longer complain about security because my client-side code is just basically calling something on the same domain. So my function would handle the security aspect, and it would actually make it easier for the client-side code. So we're going to take that XML, we're going to parse it, and then we're going to try to rewrite it such that it makes a bit more sense for your client-side code to work. That was the premise of what we did mostly last week. And today what we did was rip out that XML library, which worked, but this created a super verbose result set, switched it to a new one, plopped it back in to the serverless function, and actually have it running now in the client-side code. And again, what's kind of cool about that, and what kind of got me excited about serverless years ago, is that if for some reason this XML API went away and I had to replace it with something new, then I do so in the serverless function, and that's it. And I could even take the new result set and map it to what the client-side code expects and never have to worry about that. If I wanted to add a layer of caching, that would be really trivial. I believe Netlify added a simple data store a couple months ago, and I could use that for caching incredibly quickly. If I want to get even broader, talk about like the Jamstack and static websites, I could actually do this list at build time and only do builds, 3 or 4 times a day, depending on how often I need to worry about my airport status list. I can make this completely static and not use any API at all in the client-side application. A lot of options, which is why I started this web series, because I wanted to just share different ways of doing things. I hope that you enjoyed it. I'm happy I wasn't done in just 5 minutes. I really do have one more thing to say. The last couple of weeks, I've been gracious to have a gift from the fine folks at Algolia. They are a search engine as API system, and I use them on my blog. They've been very nice, pardon me, the last couple of weeks of giving away a prize to whomever I deemed worthy of that. So I'm going to do the same thing I did last time, which is reach out into the crowd and ask a question. And the person with the best response will win. And it's totally arbitrary and unfair. If you are the winner, please make sure you email me or DM me or reach out to me. Give me your name and email address so I can hook you up with Algolia. All right. So as I look over my comments over here, working with XML is not fun. What would you say is the one thing, or maybe more than one thing, that could possibly be worse than XML? Like, what would make you run to XML that you're working with something that's just so ugly? What's the worst format that you've had to work with? Let's see if we get any volunteers. Leave a comment. What is the what format is actually worse than XML? Surely someone is going to have something to suggest. Normally, I do this little contest in the beginning. Uh, it's not a format, but a Oracle and Oracle. Yeah, I would say raise your hand if you've ever had to work with a bad database. Typically, it's not the database; it's the person who set it up. I've had to work with some scary ones in the past. And in fact, Oracle, not to pick on Oracle, but like the last time I used it, their database table names had to be like all caps and only 8 letters. So like every table was something like TBLUSRXY. All right, any more contenders for worse things to do than parse XML? It could be anything tech. Like, what would you rather parse XML than do so and so? Brian says parsing CSVs. Last time I had to do it, there was a good NPM library for it, so it wasn't too bad. Oops, let me get rid of that banner. Anybody else? So Ariadne, she won last week. You can't win again. I'm sorry. And Brian's the host. I don't want to give him anything. I mean, I don't know. I will if I have to. And because it's not me giving it to him, it's Algolia. Yeah, Brian says there is so much variation and to give it. Yeah, I will say the last NPM library I used seemed fine, but I didn't push it hard at all. All right. Well, if I have to, I'm gonna give it to Brian. Brian, congratulations. And you know how to find me. I don't have to worry about that. You have won a piece of Algolia swag. Next week, we won't have a show, which is good because I'll be in Dev Nexus in Atlanta. And the week after that, we will have something scheduled. And I have a pretty good idea what that is. I'm thinking maybe make an app be installable on desktop. Oh, and Brian's going to be at DevNexus as well. So if you're going there, see us both. Uh, yes, I'm thinking about building a mobile app next time because that could be done 30 minutes or so. Not mobile app, a PWA. Because yeah, that can be quick. We'll see. Anyway, thank you all for being here. Thank you. If you're watching the recording, thank you for watching the recording. You can leave a comment there as well. Please come back and see me again. And have a great rest of your day.